Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Daapx 2026, a symposium on experiential design. I'm Stephanie Pilot, Dean of the College of Design, Architecture, Art, and Planning at the University of Cincinnati, and it is my pleasure and honor to welcome you all to today's event. At DAAP, we believe design influences so much more than objects or environments that we create. It shapes our experiences. It shapes how people feel, interact, and connect. And that's why experiential design is such a compelling theme for Daapx. Today's an opportunity to hear from some of our alumni whose work reflects the depth, creativity, and impact of a DAAP education. Across all our disciplines and industries, our alumni are creating meaningful experiences. They're challenging assumptions, and they're showing us all the many ways in which design can make a difference in the world. Daapx is also a celebration of community. As a DAAP architecture graduate myself, I know firsthand how powerful this network can be. Our alumni community is one of the college's greatest strengths, and it is always inspiring to see the ways in which our graduates continue to lead and innovate in the world. Thank you all for joining us today. We are so glad you're here, and I hope this symposium leaves you energized, inspired, and thinking in new ways about the future of design. And now I am delighted to welcome you to Daapx 2026. Thanks for being here and enjoy the program.
Thank you, Dean Pilot, and welcome everyone. I am Brian Trainer, a 2007 graduate of DAAP School of Architecture and Interior Design, and I'll be your host this afternoon. I'm thrilled to introduce the incredible lineup of presentations we have for you today, but before we dive in, a few quick notes. Daapx was developed in 2015 by the DAAP Alumni Council and the UC Alumni Association to celebrate alumni accomplishments while highlighting the diverse projects and experiences across the DAAP Alumni Network. This year's program is fully virtual, and we're excited to welcome viewers from near and far. To everyone watching, we encourage you to use the chat throughout the program to share thoughts and reactions as the ideas unfold. Let us know where you're watching from and when you attended UC. Throughout the program, we'll hear from 7 DAAP alumni presenters, each sharing how their work explores the ways design shapes the environments, systems, and experiences around us. Each segment will begin with a brief conversation before moving into the presentation. We'll hear 3 presentations, pause for a short intermission, and then return for the final 3. So let's get started. Kicking off today's presentations is Alex Gormley, a 2-time architectural graduate and partner at Indio, where his work focuses on designing experiential environments rooted in brand identity, hospitality principles, and thoughtful execution. His presentation, Typology, Frame, Muse, a framework for experience, explores how designers can use structured frameworks early in the design process to build layered, intentional experiences. Alex will show how this replicable approach transforms abstract ideas into cohesive environments that resonate with both clients and guests. Alex, it's great to have you with us today. I'm excited to hear your presentation. So let me start with a question. What first sparked your interest in this area of experiential design?
Well, I would say probably goes all the way back to middle school when we had a career day and architect brought in a physical scale model of a building he was working on. And that was right about the time where I was interested in all sorts of whatever Legos. And I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. So kind of stuck with it, kept looking at it, looked at a couple of things, but ultimately we ended up where we are today.
Thanks for that, Alex. It's funny because they do say Lego is the gateway experience to architecture. So, that's pretty powerful. All right. Well, I'm going to let you go. The audience is yours.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So thanks again for the introduction, Brian. And thanks to everybody who at Daapx who organized this event. I'm really happy to be here today and talking about some of the stuff that our studio is working on. Like Brian said, I'm Alex Gormley. I'm an architect from Cincinnati, but a partner here at Indio, which is a studio we have based here in Cincinnati that works on a lot of projects around the country. Today, I wanted to share a design tool we've developed in our studio called Typology Frame Muse. It's a simple framework that helps us turn early design concepts into clear experiential concepts. Before jumping into the tool itself, I wanted to give a quick bit of context about our studio. At Indio, we work across hospitality, residential, and mixed-use architectural environments. Our focus is centered around designing spaces that feel intentional, places where design decisions align around clear idea rather than just aesthetics. To support that, we built a design philosophy we call interior identity design, which uses a series of tools and workshops we've developed to help our team develop strong conceptual clarity early on in our design process. The idea behind interior identity is simple. Experiential environments don't just happen by accident. They're a result of clear, shared intent, a mutual language across the project, and a structured creative thinking that we apply to every single detail in the project. So we developed a series of tools that help our team identify the concept early. Some of those tools are our archetype workshop, typology frame Muse, an exercise we call cinema paradigm, and Indio material systems. But today, I just want to focus on one of the most versatile tools we have, which is called Typology Frame Muse. So Typology Frame Muse, or TFM as we call it in the studio, helps us build those exercises and experiences intentionally. By clearly defining what the place is, the environment it draws from, and the inspiration that gives it character, design decisions start reinforcing each other, and the ball starts rolling and snowballing down the hill. Instead of a collection of unrelated ideas, the project starts to develop this cohesive narrative that really gives it a depth of understanding. Users may not consciously recognize the framework behind the space, but our goal is always that they feel it. And we like to use this Venn diagram to kind of illustrate the overlap between the three areas of focus here. But I'll kind of get into each one a little bit more detail. So to start off with, typology, kind of the what. It defines the behavioral pattern of the space. It's the project's function. It can be a restaurant, a hotel, a bar, or a taco truck. But really, what it's doing is it's giving us a place to put the function as a foundational element of the design language, because if you kind of ignore that, it leads to problems down the road. The next piece, the frame, or what we call the context, kind of the why, the where, the when, it's cultural and geographic and historical context we're pulling into the project. This can be the neighborhood the project's located in, the time era that we're trying to root the project in, or even a design movement we're referencing. Really, it's how we want the project to be seen, and it helps to avoid confusing misalignments of references, and it helps create a setting for the space to thrive. And the last piece here is the muse. We always call it the wild card, but really it's the emotional catalyst that helps shape the materiality and the design language we're using in the project. Most of the time, our studio ends up selecting the muse based on conversations we have with the client, or kind of our design inspiration and input into the project. But we also really like to engage the client in this part of the process too, more so than the other two, just because I think if the client develops the muse with us, it leads to a better outcome and a more emotionally deep project that they can relate to as well. So, all that being said, how does this kind of relate to the context in which this Daapx event is being held this year? We're currently operating in what economists call the experience economy. It's a world where work happens remotely, goods can be delivered instantly, and entertainment is infinite. Spaces people choose to physically visit need to offer something more than convenience. They need to offer meaning. Hospitality becomes less about restaurants or hotels specifically and more about a mindset. Designing spaces that welcome people, engage them, and create memorable experiences is core to what NDO strives to do. By using Typology Frame Muse as a narrative building tool, we are able to define how projects should feel, behave, and be experienced, regardless of typology. This narrative clarity allows design decisions to reinforce one another, resulting in cohesive experiences that align with a client's underlying brand values. By clearly defining what a space is, the environment it draws from, and the inspiration that gives it character, projects gain a sense of internal logic that guests can feel, even if they can't articulate it. This is critical because, in a way, India really strives to make sure that our aesthetic decisions are guided by logic, not just by trend. And finally, at Indio, we think this as an experience as infrastructure, critical to whatever we do. Places that matter most in the future are ones that people actively choose to show up for. Understanding how this hospitality forward approach can influence a design framework on a project is really critical to every project we work on. So the question really becomes in all of this is, how do we actually design these kind of environments intentionally? And I think the best way to do that is to showcase some of our recent work in a series of case studies, all based right here in Cincinnati, to help just demonstrate how we use this tool as a integral part of our process. The first space I want to use as a case study is the newly completed Salazar restaurant in downtown Cincinnati. It's a unique process because it is a project where we were initially prompted by taking a well-known restaurant that was established over 10 years ago in Over to Rhine in a quaint little corner bistro spot and putting that into one of the more iconic, highly trafficked corners in Cincinnati. And not to mention, the building we're going into used to be a large mall like retail space. So before we even started designing, some of the problems we wanted to address were making sure that the restaurant itself still felt intimate, even though the dining room space and all that kind of stuff were 3 to 4 times larger than the original restaurant. And also trying to develop a layered experience so that the space could support both the daily diner and also the celebratory moment. So in order to do that, this is where we brought in Typology frame Muse to the project. The typology of this one was a flagship restaurant. We tried to get as specific as possible with typology in the sense that we added the term flagship in front of restaurant wherever we can, just to, again, add that layer of definition to it. But really what we mean by that is it is the namesake location for a family of brands within the restaurant group. It sets the standard for the rest to follow, but also has a conversation with the other family of brands. The frame for this, one, to fight the kind of retail nature of the building, we chose home. Home in the sense that we wanted to scale the spaces within the restaurant to a residential quality of space, bringing in soft textures, warm lighting. It really helped create an intimacy within the expansive space. We separated the dining rooms into a series of spaces too to break it down into scale and also name those after certain things to help us guide some design decision. But also, home in this case isn't just about a physical house or a lifestyle, but it's about kind of bringing about the specifics of Cincinnati as a hometown for the restaurant group. And then finally, the muse for this was the idea of a souvenir. The restaurant's owners are well traveled and love to go experience new parts of the world, which they bring back to the restaurant and share with the guest. And the goal here was to give the restaurant the ability to have some flexibility to absorb that over the years. So this idea of the souvenir became critical to our design. One, in more of informing our art direction, and two, kind of giving that layered approach to how this can evolve. So as they travel and go throughout, we can have different moods and pieces of arts and artifacts appear in the restaurant. So I'll flip through a couple slides of the actual project just to kind of give you a glimpse of what this may be kind of applied to, but you can kind of see the residential quality scale of the spaces, warm lighting. We're using a lot of woods and material palette that you would find in a house, but also in a restaurant. And then also kind of developing a series of unique vignettes to showcase this idea of a souvenir whether it be a kimono or a blanket from Peru, or just a series of actually we hid some Easter eggs throughout the design to nod to the original locations, Saks Fifth Avenue roots. So there's a couple handbags and all that kind of stuff mixed into the design. The next project I wanted to talk through today was the Mercantile Apartment Project, also in downtown Cincinnati, Ohio. Very unique project in the sense that it is a commercial office building to residential conversion, but with the foil of it was three separate buildings that were all interconnected and also had two distinctly different design areas that we had to reference. The client initially approached us as a design team to unite the project under a cohesive design language. And we felt that this was the perfect opportunity to influence that design language with our tool, Typology from Muse. So on this project, Typology, it seems obvious that it's an apartment, but really what we're trying to do with framing it in this way of a typology is using typology of apartment to scale all the spaces within the project into more of the residential scale from the once work-oriented environment. We've dealt with a lot of large floor plates throughout the project, so getting unique spaces carved into those in a way that felt more true to an apartment building was a unique one, and also capitalizing on some of the unique quirks of the existing architecture was key to our concept. The frame for this one, I wanted to highlight because it also shows the flexibility of the tool. Like I said, this project has two distinct eras of its building, one of which is the Beaux-Arts, which is the historic mercantile building, and then the other of which is the mid-century modern. It is actually used to be Formica's headquarters. So blending these two, we kind of tried to create this system where one, either building references each other, but there is a hierarchy to it. So when you're in the Formica Tower, you'll have heavy mid-century undertones to the design, but when you go into the traditional Beaux-Arts Mercantile Library building, the classical elements of design kind of are highlighted. And then the last thing here is the Muse, which is a very subtle nod to the historic mercantile library that exists within the space. We chose literature as an idea, and in doing so, we tried to incorporate features like bookshelves throughout the design, subtle nods to a library like leather furniture and paper lanterns on all of our lighting, some of which that you probably would have never known, but it's there. It's like a whisper. And then some also more obvious nods where all the units were named after literary figures in both buildings. So to kind of show you a couple examples of how that is, this is the residential library, which is actually in the mid-century modern portion of the building. You can kind of see the heavy mid-century influence of having a suspended fireplace with the mid-century cone above it. And then in the background on the left-hand side, we have a conversation pit we developed. But also the crossover happens when you go look at the billiards table, which is much more in line with the traditional Beaux-Arts building with some of its ornamentation. So you have this beautiful kind of tension between those things that kind of interplay with each other. And then throughout the building, we're kind of weaving this undertone hierarchy in the design language from the rooftop, which is all the way on the left, which is on top of the mid-century skyscraper, through the arcade, which connects the two using plant life as the foil between the modern and the traditional. And just overall, the furniture selections would lean one way or the other and kind of be used as the navigation between the two spaces. And then the final case study I wanted to talk through today is a small little taco project we did in Cincinnati here called Pata Roja Taqueria. We love this project. One, it's such a small scale where we were able to really sink our teeth into all aspects of the design. And then two, this is a project that India was in charge of not only architecture and interiors, but also had a heavy hand in the branding of it. So this client had a food truck, and we were kind of prompted on how to take his food truck energy into his first brick and mortar. And in order to do that, we use Typology frame Muse to kind of set his overall language and overall approach this, how he would do that. Typology of this one, taqueria, but in the sense of taking that energy that he developed in his food truck, where he would have lines all the way around the block to cater to. Taqueria, and also we were referencing deli architecture and interiors as well, as a way to commoditize the citizen approach to some of these street foods, where interior spaces are kind of designed around utility above all else, and also serving as many people as possible. Mexico City is of high importance to the client. He vacations there and draws a lot of inspiration from it, but also just understanding the bold use of color that you would see in Mexico City street fare is kind of critical to how we approach the project. And the last one, which is actually a really fun muse, is baseball. Pata Roja actually translates directly to red leg in Spanish, and it's a clever nod to the Cincinnati Reds, which is the owner is a longtime fan of. So in getting into the design, you can kind of see some of these influences through the colored, uh, overly colored, saturated storefront, where there's a lot of energy here, but it gets into the details where we're picking utilitarian white tile, but incorporating a red grout as a subtle nod to a baseball. We have a green floor, which I never thought I'd actually put a green floor in any space, but nodding to the green grass of a baseball field. Chain link fence of also a baseball field, and then into the branding where we actually incorporated this idea of a POW, drawing from comic books and also early baseball advertisements as a way to kind of incorporate that whisper of a muse as well. So to wrap up, I think the main idea I hope that everybody took away today is that experiential environments don't happen by accident. They're the result of a clear conceptual alignment, and typology frame Muse is simply one tool for doing that. I hope you guys will take it into the studio to practice or future projects. And I just wanted to say thanks for listening. Feel free to reach out if you need to continue the conversation. My email is on the screen. And then thanks for having me.
Alex, thank you so much for kicking us off in a fantastic way, although I'm a little grumpy about how much food you had in there that looked so delicious, because it's a little too close to lunch for me. But also thanks for sharing the insights and perspective about the typology frame Muse and how the inspiration comes together to inform the end design and create an experience that includes the community and the end user as well. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Great. Now on to our second presentation. Anna Barchick-Suter is the Development Director for NEST, Cincinnati's Northside Community Development nonprofit, where she oversees the organization's real estate development projects. An urban planning graduate, Anna will be presenting Prioritizing People, a Planner's Perspective on Streetscapes, displaying how thoughtful, people-first design strategies can reshape streets into vibrant, connected public spaces. Anna, thank you for joining us. I have a question for you. If you had a Wayback Machine and you could go back to your student self from where you are today, what's something about your path since graduation that might surprise your student self?
I think the work I do would surprise me. The co-op element of DAAP and UC as a whole is such a strong selling point, and I think through that I was learning whether you hate or love a co-op experience, you're learning, okay, this is an area I want to keep going down, or no, that's not quite me. And so coming out of UC, I had a pretty good foundation of I want to work in the city I live in. I can bring that personal experience to the job and also benefit from the work that I'm doing. But I didn't know that I would draw me into community development, real estate development. It was just after I'm originally from Toledo, and after graduating, went back to Toledo, then came back to Cincinnati, that I found work at 3CDC. And that's what got me going within community development. And now I'm at Nest, continuing on that same path.
Fantastic. From a mud hen to a bear cat. So, welcome. All right, Anna, the audience is yours.
All right. Let's hope this goes through. Okay, you see a presentation all right?
Yes,
Super.
I do. You're good to go.
So as an urban planner, and again, kind of parroting what I said to Brian about bringing a personal experience to my professional world, streetscapes are that for me, or one piece of it. And so to give a bit of background on me, in addition to coming from planning, I think I came to planning from growing up in a city neighborhood in Toledo that was incredibly walkable. Within a 5 to 15-minute walk of my house, we could get to a few parks, a library, my grade school, the dry cleaners, and we knew our neighbors really well because just a part of our daily life was walking the dogs, going places in the community. And so that is really ingrained in my preference for where I want to live. And since I've left Toledo and gone to different cities for co-op, I've always chosen a city that offers a similar experience. Even if the city is different in its unique way, there's still that pedestrian element to it, because I think it really deepens a person's understanding of a city and a community when they move through it on foot or on a bike, as opposed to in a car. And so then an additional layer of personal experience related to streetscapes is I'm a runner, and in 2021 I was out for a run in the morning before work, and while crossing the street with a cross light, and I had cars were supposed to be stopped, I was hit by a car, someone who had run a red light, and it was an incredibly serious injury. I have now part of my skull had to be replaced. I took off work for 6 months to get through it and go through all of the therapy. I had to relearn to kind of read, write, and speak again. And that furthered my commitment and belief in the need to prioritize people before cars when we're designing streetscapes. So I'm able to, like I mentioned before, as an urban planner, marry my personal experiences with my professional. And through community development, I have a lot of opportunities to address streetscape pieces in our projects, whether it's at the small scale, like the sidewalks and the curb are pretty busted up from just being, years of use without maintenance, up to full streetscape projects. Like while I was at 3CDC, we did several streetscape projects where just for a block or so, a length of the street, we were totally redoing the street, the sidewalks, adding street trees, pedestrian crosswalks, and signals. So again, I'm able to marry those two pieces of it. And that's why I'm such an advocate for prioritizing people as we design streetscapes, because regardless of what you do professionally or for fun, where you live, you are interacting with streetscapes daily. At the most car-focused level, that's a highway, which understandably can't be pedestrianized, but everything from there down can be, whether it is a busier road like Liberty Street or Central Parkway, or a small neighborhood, just mostly residential street. And I think when we prioritize people in those designs, it's for the better of everything. It makes the place more appealing, more welcoming. Somebody wants to stay there a little bit longer. They're safer as a pedestrian or a bicyclist moving through the space, because there's intentional design that helps mitigate potential accidents and conflict with cars. And if you're somebody moving through a space on foot or in a bike, there's a health benefit to you personally. And then at the macro scale, there's economic impact to it, because if you spend more time in a place, you are more likely to maybe spend a little more money, meet people, attract more people to the area who they may spend money or decide they want to live there. And so it has this, its size, it's scaled up from just the very individual level.
Gotcha. And not to kill your flow here, but
yeah,
just so you know, you're also sharing your presenter notes.
Oh no, I'm
just
sorry.
for everybody. And
Let me
I didn't want to
recalibrate.
interrupt you before when you were talking about your accident, because that's like the worst time. So
Okay, let's try this again.
exactly.
Sorry about that.
Don't apologize. I just wanted to, hey, we're doing this way for the first time, so we're all learning together.
Okay.
Fortunately, we have prestige, and this is not their first. It's like their 45th rodeo, so I think they're
How
good
about
to go.
now?
Now I see Nesta started. There you go. That looks perfect, Anna. I'm sorry to.
Okay. No,
Please
sorry about
continue.
that, everybody. Okay. There are a few notes on mine, but you got to see glimpses. Okay, so streetscape design. Now that I've kind of laid that groundwork and tested some technology into the streetscape itself. So first, let's start with an initial kind of touching personal experience perception of something. Imagine you are walking on the sidewalk on either of these streets, one in OTR on Vine Street and one by Rookwood on Edwards. And how do these places feel for you? What do you want to do or not do in them? What kind of time do you want to spend there? Because these are examples of streetscapes, and one favors a car and one favors a person. And so it's, again, I'll keep underlining this point of people over cars or vehicles, because in designing for a person, we're creating a safer place for travel for all modes of transportation, whether you're walking, biking, or driving, because by doing it at the human scale, we're going to inherently slow down drivers. You know, when you are driving on Edwards, going 40 or 45 miles an hour feels like nothing. Whereas if you're on Vine Street going 45, you know you are just like flying through the space. And so the prioritization of people allows us to focus on them, which inherently brings everybody into a safer, more positive area space to share and travel through. And like I mentioned on that last slide, it also invites people to spend more time there. Say you go to, I live in Northside, so I'll reference that. Say you really love Collective Espresso, so you drive to Collective Spot on Hamilton, and you get out and you're walking around because you're going to need to probably park within a block, not terribly far, but there'll be a little bit of walking. You're not parking in a parking lot and walking to their front door. And when you get your coffee, you come out and you notice like, oh, just a block that way, there's Melt. I actually am kind of hungry. That could be a good lunch spot. And so you're willing to walk over there. And then when you get to Melt, you see that, well, a little further down, there's a park, there's a record shop. And suddenly this multi-block area feels smaller and more accessible. And you're going to linger in the space. And even if you only spend money at Collective, you're interacting with people in the community, and you're probably going to want to come back to Northside, or at least with my Nest hat on, I hope you do. And so that sense is because of intentional design elements that, again, favor the person. So it can be multifaceted. And if you do them all, maybe it's a higher impact, but you can also have a limited selection of them and still have a positive impact to the pedestrian experience. So it's things like sidewalks. Are they wide or narrow? Are they there at all? When we favor cars, they're likely not there. Driving lanes, are there more or less of them? Are they narrow or wide? Speed limits, always, that's an obvious one, but to be a pedestrian, 35 miles an hour feels shockingly fast compared to 25. Whereas if you're a driver, you don't notice it as much, or 25 just feels like so slow. You can also do it through traffic signals, where if we're prioritizing cars, we time up these signals so that you never hit a red light. It's just a continuous green light and traffic moves. Again, the pedestrian comes second to the car. Whereas if you reverse that, you set it up so that the pedestrian is prioritized. If they hit the crosswalk button, it can initiate a change in light that lets them cross. It also helps them have a dedicated place to cross where they're more likely to be seen by cars and don't feel like, okay, this takes so long, I'm just going to jaywalk, or I don't even see a crosswalk, I'm just going to jaywalk, because that's a risk that then enters the situation with a car. So now I'm going to pan through a few side-by-sides of streetscapes and locally that have been redone and start pointing out things that helped improve them for the pedestrian. So a really notable one that I would guess most of the folks listening in have been to is Vine Street and Over the Rhine. So you can see on the left in 2007, this is the same shot of Vine Street. And you can see how different it feels. On the current day, post streetscape project version of Vine, what is making it feel more human scaled? It's things like the street trees, the planters, that outdoor dining patio in front of alcove. In the middle, you see these high-vis crosswalk signs with a elevated piece that acts as both a speed bump for cars to slow down and an elevated crossing point for pedestrians. From a more crosswalk intersection standpoint on by UC's campus on Clifton, this point in the middle of Clifton, like right across from the Stratford housing, there has been in recent years a narrowing of the street. So this median that is here predates Google Street View, which I know a Google Street View snapshot is like not a very DAAP approach to not have a professional photography angle, but it's a really helpful tool to compare moments in time. And so this median predates Street View, but before then, this would have been a 5-lane street to cross for a pedestrian, which feels totally different and a little more nerve-wracking. So the addition of that was a win. And then in the recent past, the added pedestrian elements of adding a dedicated bike lane, so that took away a driving lane. And also, if you just go on either side of this intersection a bit, it then becomes a dedicated bike lane with a dedicated parking lane and then one driving lane. So in kind of restricting the driving lanes and the width of them, we're narrowing the crossing point for a pedestrian. So they can get from one side of the road to the other with less of an intersection with cars. They now have 3 lanes that are driving versus 4, and prior to this median, 5. Another way to do that narrowing of the crossing point is through a pedestrian concrete bump out like Northside has on Hamilton, and also a dedication of curbside parking. So in 2011, when this was taken, the curbside parking could happen outside of rush hour traffic or rush hour. So if you were here during the morning and evening, this was 2 lanes of traffic each way, and right next to it a sidewalk, which feels totally different, and at least for me, a bit nerve-wracking to have traffic right next to you on the sidewalk. In 2018, when they made it dedicated street parking, no rush hour exception, we then narrowed those driving lanes to 2, and then also shortened the cross point for pedestrians with these bump outs. Then my last example this is where my accident happened. So in 2019, and then in this screenshot's from 2019, but in 2021, when I was hit, this is what the street looked like. Effectively 2 lanes each way, because there weren't a lot of cars parking on this curb lane to prevent traffic from moving through it. And as I was crossing the street, there was a car stopped already at the red light on the opposite side, and then the driver dipped into the outer lane to avoid them and blew the light and hit me. So Nest and the community council had already been working on pedestrian safety at the time of my accident, but I think it was a helpful leverage point for them to be able to get immediate response from the city to prevent future accidents. And while these bollards do the same thing that this concrete bump out does, they're a helpful tool to more quickly put in a solution that will narrow the crosswalk, prevent a driver from going around somebody who is stopped to blow a red light. And so it's one of the many tools you can utilize to humanize and prioritize the pedestrians in these streetscapes. So I hope I have quickly and at a high level conveyed the importance of personalizing the streetscape, because designing for the vehicle, prioritizing the car, really dehumanizes the physical spaces. It might discourage people from spending time there. It detaches a driver from those around them, because if you think when you're driving, what are you looking for? Other cars. And if you're in a place like Edwards, you are certainly not thinking about pedestrians and bicyclists because it's so car centric. But when you're in a neighborhood that is very person focused, you're queued up to be looking for other users and other modes of transportation. So I really hope you can take away from my spiel today that become more aware and safer as a driver, but also advocate for pedestrian design because it impacts you. And I'm sure we all are living in places that will see some streetscape improvements during our time there. And you as a resident can use that as a strength to advance things that help you to move on foot safely. So thanks for listening to all that. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out at Nest. Thank you.
Anna, thank you very much. Thank you for one, surviving your crash and so that we can hear your great presentation. But two, it's interesting, like good design is something that the end user doesn't have to think about. And it just, it sounds like the design that you're promoting encourages pro-social behaviors. And let's worry about people first and objects later. You know what I mean? So, well, maybe not later, but hopefully I didn't sum that up horribly. But
No.
Thank you for sticking with us through the technology. Appreciate it very much.
But I could be a test run. Hopefully everybody else now knows which one to share.
I love it. Somebody's got to do it. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. All right. On to our next presenter. Daniel Winterich is an interior design graduate whose career spans art, architecture, and entrepreneurship through his practice, Studio Winterich. His multidisciplinary studio pursues commissioned permanent and temporary art installations, design, and architectural projects. Daniel will be presenting an Acorn cap inspires architecturally integrated public art, exploring the conceptual and technical journey behind Returned Oak, a site-responsive public art installation rooted in ecological history and architectural precision. This presentation reveals how art and architecture can merge to create work that is both rigorously constructed and deeply connected to place. Daniel, it's great to have you here.
Thanks, Brian. It's an honor to be here.
Thanks. So if you had one DAAP memory that still, do you have one DAAP memory that still shapes how you approach your work today?
Yeah, definitely. I would say my second year design studio with Jerry Limenstall and Joe Hazel, where we had to design an experiential sequence of spaces that were meant to evoke certain emotions. And all we had to work with were the shape of a cube and portions of a cube. And I just love the abstract sculptural quality of that assignment.
Love it. Thank you for sharing that, Daniel. Well, I'm going to let you go from here. The audience is yours, sir.
All right, great. Thanks. Just share my screen. All right. Can you see the PowerPoint presentation?
I do, but I see your sidebar as well, just so you know.
All right.
So full screen. There we go. That's perfect.
Great.
You're good to go, Daniel.
Thank you. So my studio is in Pleasant Hill, California, which is outside of San Francisco. And I established the studio in 1996. And my career really started in my family's liturgical arts studio in Cleveland, Ohio. It was founded by my great-grandfather in 1913. His father was a sculptor and practiced on the Cologne Cathedral. So I'm the fifth generation of our family working in architectural arts. So the family studio designed mostly traditional church interiors, not only designed, but built. So everything you see in this church includes crafts that the studio actually did. So I grew up working in the stained glass studio. We also did some contemporary work. This is the Air Force Academy Chapel in Colorado Springs. I tended to gravitate towards the contemporary work. And around 16, I found a book in our library of this German artist, Ludwig Schaffrath, whose work greatly influenced my career path. So at UC, I entered into the interior design program in 78, graduated in 84. And during one of my co-ops, I was able to go to Germany and work as a glass painting intern at Oitmann Glasmalerei. This is outside of Aachen and Cologne, Germany's oldest and largest stained glass studio. And then just last summer, I went with one of my daughters back to the studio 44 years later and got to visit with Stefan Oitman, who now runs a studio with his cousin Heinrich. So my apprenticeship involved 3 months of training. And that training involved painting straight lines with paint and brush, 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week over 3 months. Yeah, very much a Zen experience. But what that taught me is how to handle the paint, how to handle the brush, and enabled me to create a piece like this. So of course, while I was there, I traveled and saw all the great cathedrals throughout Europe and some amazing secular buildings. This is the Bibliothek library in Munich. So I'm always looking for the quality of light in architectural interiors. And I would say that Robert Irwin, one of the artists who have influenced my thinking over the years, was a master at creating installations using very simple materials, creating these very ephemeral places. Another artist who influenced my thinking, I'd say, is Larry Bell, who elegantly uses very simple commercial glass to create these amazing sculptures. And then Donald Judd, this is in Marfa, Texas, is 100 milled aluminum boxes. And simple aluminum boxes create these amazing compositions of light and shadow. So I moved to the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area in 1984 and worked for 3 architects over 10 years. And those architects I worked with became kind of my agents when I started my own studio in 96. So for instance, this project for Microsoft Silicon Valley campus, my friend Fred Cazada brought me in and I was commissioned to do a water feature in the center of their campus. So this is a project where I learned some things that I brought forward to the installation I'm going to be featuring in a minute in Oakland, California. So what I learned here is that these little dots that you see, these are dichroic glass lenses that act like mirrors. And they, as you walk by this installation, this fountain sort of shifts in color and sparkles kind of like stars in a sky. Another project that taught me the benefit of reflected light, I would say, is the San Francisco Conservatory of Music, downtown San Francisco. So here I was commissioned to design the facade with the architects SMWM, and I created this composition of glass fins, each with a dichroic strip at the end. And that dichroic glass creates these streaks of both reflected light and transmitted light in the practice rooms, which of course tracks across the rooms as the sun moves across the sky. So onto the project I'm going to feature today. This is a public art commission for private development at the old Key System building. This is down at Broadway and 12th Street, downtown Oakland. So this building was condemned after the Loma Prieta earthquake in 1989, and then purchased by Ellis Partners, the developer, who hired Gensler to design a new high-rise that would actually connect to the old historic building. And because it's downtown, there's a public art requirement, and the developers and architects designated a band along the storefront. This is on Broadway, and then a similar band around the corner on 12th Street as the site for the public art. So when I was commissioned, I thought, okay, where do we begin with this, right? How do you begin a project like this? And for me, it always begins with a site analysis. And specifically, what are the solar angles that are affecting these glass facades, right? So the red triangles you see are the times when there's actually direct sunlight on the building, which taught me that there's not much direct sunlight on the building. Additionally, the architects and developers asked that I not use color in this public art installation. So here I am, a glass artist. I have very little direct sunlight. I can't use color, and that's my challenge. So I always begin a project by looking at the history of the site. Downtown Oakland is the unceded territory of the Chochenyo people, who are part of the Ohlone tribe. They've lived here for thousands of years. And throughout this region were these coastal live oak trees, and the acorn was a principal food source for the Chochenyo. I noticed in the token for the key system, which was the I should have mentioned, is the old streetcar system throughout downtown Oakland and into Berkeley, actually across the Bay Bridge for a while. So I noticed the pattern of an acorn cap in that token. Next up was to look at precedents for storefronts in downtown Oakland, similar to most of urban US. So retail spaces often have a mezzanine level above them where they store inventory, and that inventory is shielded usually by some sort of obscured glass, like on the left here, some leaded glass. And then I noticed in this building on the right where they used this sort of black reflective fluted tile above the red windows in the spandrel area. And the way that these tiles kind of catch the sunlight and create shade as you walk by is sort of like, I'd say, a lenticular painting. Really caught my attention. Okay, so on to the actual design of the installation. So I focused on the acorn cap, and there's a geometry there that I was interested in. I did sort of a visual analysis of the acorn cap, and I found a proportion system that in the way that the bracts, or these small leaflets, are organized across the cap. So small to large, that proportion system is a factor of 1.0625. And then I looked at the geometry of the building, which is based on a 15-foot column grid. Gensler divided the storefront in half, so you can see in the lower part of this drawing. And then I divided that module in half again, and that became sort of the module for my art glass, which is roughly 11.5 feet tall by 3.5 feet wide. So I took I mashed up actually the Acorn proportion system and the building geometry to create vertical divisions across the facade and diagonal divisions using that proportion system. And then connected the dots and started to get a two-dimensional graphic that started to speak to me. And so expanding that graphic into something in 3 dimensions, I grabbed the intersections and sort of pushed them and pulled them to create a 3-dimensional quality to this design. And that resulted in this SketchUp model, which became sort of the genesis for the final design, which is this. This is the rendering that we used to pitch the concept to the developers and architects. Fortunately, they liked it, and we were able to move on into making this real. So how do you do that? So we always start with small glass samples to prove the concept. So on the left, you see some CNC cut molds that are placed inside of a kiln, and then a piece of flat glass is set on the molds, heated up to about 1150 degrees. And then the glass actually slumps and takes the form of those molds. And here are those first samples. We're also exploring color of glass and texture. So we selected color and texture on the left, and then did full-size mock-ups of the actual glass panels. And here, I'm getting excited because I can see that this glass is going to do what I want it to do. These lighter facets you can see are reflecting the sky, and the darker ones are reflecting the sidewalk. So I know, like that Microsoft project, as you walk past these glass panels, they're going to be animated. They're going to flicker and change. The last thing is, what do you do about safety, right? So we've got these 300-pound panels of glass that are 22 feet in the air. And my fabricator, Dorothy Lenahan, came up with this brilliant idea, one of many brilliant ideas, to cover the glass in a paint protection film. So basically creating a safety laminated scenario where in this case, we did an impact test, where if the glass is broken, it stays together like the windshield of your car. So we were successful there. So As we all know, artwork is best experienced rather than described. And since we can't all go to downtown Oakland right now, I brought a video of the installation. So let's take a look. All right. Thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you very much. That was exciting to see that that could be a different experience every time you interact with it. Going and it's static, which is amazing. So it's like you created motion, and to go from an acorn cap to that. Plus, when you start talking about the math of nature, I'm always excited. But yeah, thank you,
I'm always
Daniel,
in
very much.
too. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Well, I hope everyone watching live has enjoyed the program so far. Don't forget that we have the comment section open so you can let us know where you're watching from, what year you graduated. We're going to take a brief 10-minute intermission and we'll return shortly for the remaining presentations. While we take the break, feel free to stretch, grab a snack, and keep the conversation going in the chat. We'll be back here very soon. Thank you. And we are back. Thank you, everyone. We hope you had a nice little break there, but I'm excited to jump right into our next presenter. Right now, we have Sneha Ameya, a Master of Architecture graduate drawn to community-driven sustainable projects that include adaptive reuse and renovations. Her work in the K through 12 and higher education sectors has shaped her approach to thoughtful, inclusive design. Her presentation, Designing for Autism, explores how a holistic, autism-friendly design approach can be adopted in the renovation of an existing public school building. Sneha, thank you for joining us. Welcome.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Thank you. So what's something about your path since graduation that might surprise your student self?
I think just the opportunity to get to work in higher education and K through 12 schools. That's not something that I really thought I would go into originally. But I think the co-op program at the UC and DAAP is just really fantastic and allowed me to kind of try different sectors and see what I liked. So I ended up landing on K through 12 through that program. So I'm happy that that had worked out. So yeah, it's crazy.
No, it's great. But the co-op experience is kind of the a la carte menu where you find what you really
Right.
like to eat, you know. So it's Perfect. Well, Sneha, the audience is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, let me share my screen.
Please do.
So for my presentation, I was really focused on designing for autism, specific to public elementary school renovation in Boston. And this just sort of goes through the work that I did in my master's thesis project. Before I get into my design and what I ended up landing on, I just wanted to give a brief overview of the education system in Massachusetts because I know that a lot of people might not be familiar with that. For Massachusetts, we have one of the highest math scores, reading scores, and college readiness, but we also have a really large population of students with disabilities on an IEP program or special needs program. And the reason for that is because we have a very well informed and maintained individualized education program, and also have a high per pupil expenditure rate, which basically just means that we spend more money per square footage on students across the board. So what does that really mean in terms of design and architecture? It means that the Massachusetts School Building Authority, who's in charge of, the renovation, new addition, new construction of schools in the area, really have the time and the money and the, I guess, privilege to encourage architects to work closely with faculty to understand spatial requirements for students on the IEP program specifically. Despite all of the efforts that Massachusetts puts into providing accommodations in the design and the built environment in these spaces, I feel like that autistic considerations are often left not in scope, or they're VE'd out, or because of budgetary reasons, or they're just very limited in scope. So we'll really design the hell out of like one room in the space, but we won't really consider or carry those design choices throughout the building. So my research question for my thesis project was really how can a holistic autistic friendly design approach be adopted into the renovation of an existing public school building in Boston? And part of the research that I had done for this project led me to Magda Mustafa's work, who, if you are not familiar, is the professor of design and architecture at the American University of Cairo. And she is the author of the world's first research-based design framework called Aspects Design Index. And this design index, I listed the kind of criteria or the categories here on the right, um, is she's really trying to actively work on codifying these principles into international design policy for autism spaces or autistic spaces. So I won't get too much into these categories because I think it's just easier to show and not tell what these are. But you have acoustics, spatial sequencing, escape spaces, compartmentalization, transitions, sensory zoning, and safety. So all 7 of these things I wanted to apply into the renovation as I'm designing of the school that I was looking at, which is the John F. Kennedy Elementary School, which is located in the Jamaica Plain, Massachusetts area near Boston. It's 28,500 square footage, 2 floors, typical sort of like masonry facade with flat roof. So 1970s, 1980s building. The school population is 375 students with a wide range of grades. Definitely not typical for Ohio, I would think, but grades K all the way through 6, so ages 4 through 10. And there's also varying abilities. So there's some students who are on the IEP program who are autistic. There are students who are not on the IEP program and autistic, and then there's neurotypical students. So a wide mix of students that you're trying to design a space for. I thought this was good. This was a good opportunity to sort of dive into autism as a spectrum and just sort of define some of the qualities or the characteristics that we will be taking a look at, or I was taking a look at for this design. So for autism spectrum, I was really looking at the circular model, which sort of breaks down 10 different characteristics or qualities of autism. And the circular model on the right really shows how the diversity amongst the autistic community, because you can rank really high on likely to have meltdowns, but you could also rank low on need for routine, and that can change depending on the student. I think these three that I've highlighted here, need for routine, executive function, and sensory processing issues, is the three that really have potential solutions that we can create in the built environment. So need for routine, obviously, is this sort of need to have a schedule or know what's going to happen and have a clarity in space. Executive function is this disability of not being able to understand or prioritize different tasks, or be able to prioritize different like social hierarchy. And then sensory processing issues is I think a little more common, and people might understand a little bit more, is when you're either hypersensitive, meaning sensory avoidant, or hyposensitive and you're sensory seeking. And so and not having those particular needs met can create a sense of overwhelm and could lead to meltdowns or severe anxiety. So back to the John F. Kennedy Elementary School, what is the problem? Well, the first thing I did was take a look at the existing layout of the first floor and conduct a sensory zoning analysis. And this is part of Magda Mustafa's Aspects Design Criteria sensory zoning, which talks about you need to organize program in accordance with their sensory quality rather than their functional programming, or what we might think it makes sense functionally, right? So in this space here, they have an auditorium in the far left corner, a gym and a cafeteria on the far right, this weird kind of awkward offshoot of classrooms that I believe is just for kindergartners. And then the admin suite is in the heart, but there's this like, weird, there's like two entry points, and it's not very clear which one is the entry point. There's this courtyard that's very heavily used, but it's also very open to this road here. So if you're a student, and if you're an autistic student and you're feeling overwhelmed, there is a risk of flight. And part of the sensory zoning analysis is also creating these three categories. So the green represents low sensory familiar spaces, which means it's spaces that engage one sense at a time and can be processed at a manageable rate. And interactions are familiar. So those spaces I've indicated with classroom. Then there's high sensory familiar spaces, which is spaces that engage multiple senses, but interactions are predictable or happens on a regular basis. So for me, that felt like it was at the gym or the cafeteria or the auditorium. These spaces are chaotic and unpredictable, but it's part of the routine. And once you know what that activity is, it's very predictable, and you can sort of understand what's going on there. And then the last one is the most scary one for autistic individuals, which is the high sensory unfamiliar space, which is spaces that engage multiple senses, loud noises, loud smell, like a lot of smells, a lot of color, all of these things that are contradicting each other, and also involve a high level of unexpected or unplanned social interaction. For example, running into people, or brushing up against the wall, or getting pushed aside. So these are kind of the things that I was taking a look at, and I think the biggest culprit here is obviously the corridor, right? So how did I resolve it? The first thing I did was take the gym and the cafeteria, which was on this right-hand corner, and move it closer to the auditorium. So I'm grouping the senses together. And then I made more classrooms on this side and replaced it with an OTPT sensory room, which is a dedicated room for autistic individuals who have physical disabilities and need to do movement training. They need different equipment for that. And then what I did was take the corridor and increase the size of the corridor by 10 feet. So you're putting a little more distance in between the students, and hopefully reducing some of those unplanned interactions that you're going to have. The other thing I did is add this leg here, which encloses the courtyard. So when you're at recess after gym, there is less of a flight risk for students who are autistic and overwhelmed. the next step that I did was really design the corridor. So here are some, we're getting back to some of Magda Mustafa's um, design index or criteria. So, for example, I really consider the transition of going from the classroom to the corridor and that door condition. There was a lot of pinch points, so I increased the door from a single leaf to a double leaf so that there's more space for two students to kind of walk next to each other. Um, and then I also had intermediate escape spaces, which is this kind of carved out condition right next to the door where it's kind of fixed seating where, if you're a student and you're walking down this hallway that's very, very crowded, there is a space to quote kind of escape and remove yourself briefly from that high sensory space and take respite. So that's escape spaces. And then the color. So I also was considering wayfinding strategies. So separating out the colors based on grade. So if you're, in kindergarten, oh, I'm in the red classroom, I'm a kindergartner. Oh, I'm a first grader, I'm going to the green side. Or, oh, I'm a first grader, I'm going to the purple. This kind of visual indicators and cues to really show and explain the activity that goes on in that room without using visual indicators. The next thing I did was really take a look at the classroom. So the classroom is similar sort of considerations. For example, that transition zone, I wanted to include a cubby space that would separate the corridor and the learning space. So it gives a moment where the student can take off their backpack and take a moment for themselves and kind of brace themselves for the transition that they're going to make from a low sensory to a high sensory space. In addition to that, I used acoustic ceiling baffles to also mitigate some of that noise from the corridor that might come into the classroom. And I also wanted to create a little escape pod in every classroom where it would be, a sliding glass door so teachers can still look in, but it would be a way for students who are feeling overwhelmed during learning to escape to when they're feeling overwhelmed. So putting it all together, this is sort of where I landed with the classroom corridor sort of design. There's a lot of little tiny things that I can get into right now, but again, you can see that locker space is sort of in the middle there, and the colors and the acoustic ceiling baffles and the double doors. It's all like kind of alleviating that transition point so students can really understand that and brace themselves for different sensory qualities or spaces. And then in the corridor, I decided to actually put this kind of partial wall in between so that there is a portion of the hallway that could be used with the learning. So part of, the strategy of making the corridor feel more familiar is to make it more familiar and make it more teaching and learning spaces so that students have more time spent in this corridor. So you can imagine, a teacher would have their class do like a more standard, like homework, whatever, like lecture style class. And then as a reward, you can come out here and I have, sensory play sort of structures along the wall so that that can become almost like a reward and by making it a reward, but hopefully the corridor feels a little less intense. I also wanted to talk about the material palette. So I feel like with autistic design, there's always a tendency to just make everything wood and make it all calm. But I feel like that's very confusing for the autistic individual because there's no visual clarity. Again, we want wayfinding. We want it to be clear what activity is happening in a space very clearly, just right off the bat, without the student having to do, trying to get confused. And I know I'm kind of running out of, I might run out of time a little bit, but I just wanted to like kind of brush through where I landed on the sequencing. So this is kind of the new main entry. Again, it's like you have this like kind of gestural like canopy, which really indicates like, hey, this is the main entry, not any of the other entrances. Make it very clear to the students. And once you enter, that yellow sort of carries into the corridor, and it sort of becomes like another wayfinding strategy for the students. And again, we see this corridor here where one side is driven for hyposensitive or sensory seeking students, and they have all these sort of wall sensory play elements along the wall. And then on the other side, while, a class might be out there, another class can quietly kind of line up and walk to wherever they need to go. And again, we have these escape spaces throughout that provides moments of respite for the student who might feel overwhelmed. And then also a sort of sensory grounding sort of texture on the wall to students who might be overwhelmed and walking through this corridor. So again, really grounding the student in the space and making it more familiar. Another teaching space in the outside, connecting the first floor and the second floor. Stairs can be really overwhelming, so trying to make that less overwhelming, make it more familiar, have another teaching space, books along the lines. Just some things that I considered. Some exterior conditions I considered, using that color of green and the pink and the blue and in the windowsills to really highlight what class is in that classroom, and also separating out the gym and the class corridor like material. So the class corridor is like brick, but the cafeteria might be wood or a different texture, whatever that might be, but really differentiating the activity. And then this is sort of overall, you can kind of see the enclosed nature of the courtyard. It's now a little more safe, and yeah, it's kind of where I landed. And I I think for this framework, I would really be curious to see how it's applied in not just K through 12 schools, but also other sectors. Like I think I can see this being applied in multifamily projects, single family projects. The opportunities seem endless, so I'm really excited to. I hope that it gets adopted internationally, or I want to see where it goes, basically. So
Yeah, me too, Sneha. For me, like I could talk to you offline about this for ad nauseum because my daughter is nonverbal autistic, and so I've lived through the IEPs. I have an
yeah,
OISP meeting later today for her because she's an adult now. So I can but some of these design principles benefit not just neurodivergent people, but anyone. I personally
yeah,
could use an escape room, escape spaces and things like. So I understand the need for respite and the need, so not every experience is the right level of whelming. Sometimes they're overwhelming. So,
right, right. All right, I'll
So,
stop sharing.
no, you're right. I'm sorry. I
No,
was,
no, no, you're good. That was pretty much it. I discovered this in my thesis, and I've been like itching to share it. So yeah,
well, we appreciate it. Thank you so very much, Sneha. Thanks
thank
for being
you.
a part
Thank
of
you
this.
so much. All right.
Great. Now, moving on to our next segment. It's a special one as we welcome two DAAP alumni presenting together. We have Beth Hitchcock and Taylor Long. Beth is the founder of Fluffy, a body diversity brand consultancy helping companies build profitable size inclusive strategies. And Taylor is a designer, model, and entrepreneur redefining what inclusivity looks like in fashion. Both are fashion design graduates, and together they will present the $1 billion blind spot, why size inclusivity is fashion's next gold rush. Their presentation explores the surprising economics of exclusion, why brands leave billions on the table, how outdated manufacturing models perpetuate the problem, and what forward-thinking companies are doing differently. So Taylor, Beth, thanks for joining us today. Can either of you share what first sparked your interest in this area of experiential design? Don't fight over it. I don't know. Yeah, you're gonna have to unmute Beth if you want to talk. So, sorry.
I realize we're both muted. So I think what sparked for me first was just lived experience. So being a plus size woman my entire life, and growing up like having such a passion for fashion, not to rhyme, but I realized like I never saw myself in magazines. I always found shopping very difficult, even from a young age. And then I obviously went into fashion, and it kind of perpetuated from there. My experience is working in the industry, seeing how things were done behind the scenes. And I was like, okay, there's something wrong here. Like it needs to shift.
Identified. Thank you. Thank you, Beth. I don't want to take up all of your time with questions. I want to let you both get into your presentation. So Beth and Taylor, if you're ready to take it away, please do.
Sure.
The audience is yours.
All right.
It's nice to know I'm not the only one that's like, where's that button? Okay. I see your whole screen. So if you want to blow that up.
All right.
If you can
Seeing it
enlarge that
correctly?
even more,
Okay.
I see your background is what I'm saying. So
Sorry.
I've got your whole thing.
Okay.
Right there in the bio. There you go.
Got it. Is that
And
working?
yeah,
Or
I
is it
see your
still-
presenter notes, but that's
Why
you
is
know,
this doing? Sorry.
it just wants to misbehave.
Um,
It's just because everybody's watching. That's just how it works.
There we go. Okay. Is
Perfect.
that working?
You're
Yeah.
great. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Awesome. So yes, so today we're going to talk about the $1 billion blind spot and the economics of exclusion. So fashion and beauty have spent decades optimizing for like a very narrow definition of who their customer is, but also what beauty is. And the result is an industry that's leaving a big demand and billions of revenue untapped and on the table. And it's not just an issue of representation, but it's an issue of supply and demand and the mismatch there. The consumer exists, the demand exists, but the product does not exist. And really the beauty, fashion, even wellness, fitness have really kind of built barriers to their growth. There's billions in purchasing power that remains untapped.
So some facts we always usually like to start out with, because many people are not aware of this when we're presenting, is that so the average American woman wears a size 16-18, which is the equivalent of, let's say, a 2X. The percentage of women in the US that are plus size is around 70%, and that's even with the rise of GLP-1s. And then only about 20% of the fashion industry currently produces plus size clothing. And then so from a market opportunity perspective, obviously that leaves a ton of room for growth and opportunity. So the global women's apparel market is valued at 1.1 trillion. The global women's plus size apparel market is valued at 291 billion. That is expected to jump to 594 billion by 2032. And some of those key drivers that the customers are looking for is accurate fit, because a lot of brands are not getting it right when it comes to fit. A lot of them, for those who are familiar with fashion design, they will simply grade up from their smallest size, which, as we designers know, the body fundamentally changes once you move into plus sizes. So that just simply isn't a way to do that correctly. They're also looking for quality, consistency, varied options, because more often than not, the plus size consumer is only given a small subset of offerings as opposed to what is offered to straight sizes, which is, sizes roughly 0 to 12. But then also brand integrity and making sure that it comes from a place of transparency, honesty, all those things.
And we just wanted to give a quick background kind of to how we got to starting Fluffy. So I graduated from DAAP 9 years prior to Taylor, but we had very similar experiences in the education side of things. When I left DAAP, I went straight into publication world and worked at Condé Nast for Lucky Magazine that doesn't exist anymore. So I had a lot of experience with obviously the magazine world and seeing like what was put out there into the world, like how beauty was being promoted, how fashion was being promoted, which we all know from decades back, but it hadn't shifted much at that point. From there, I went quickly into the styling world, creative direction. I started modeling a bit. So I was really working behind the scenes with a lot of brands, and I was seeing that big disconnect between what the brands were doing and what plus size consumers were wanting, which is what pushed me to start Fluffy.
And then for me, as Beth mentioned, obviously we were in DAAP, just not at the same time. But during my time in school is when I started working as a plus size model, was signed to Ameya Models in New York. And it was really kind of seeing at the same time what the lack of options were for curvy and plus size women, because at the time I was not plus size, but in the fashion industry, if you're bigger than a size 4 or 6, you're getting put on the curve board. And then also seeing in school how we really weren't being taught how to truly design inclusively. So that kind of manifested itself in my senior capstone collection, which was size inclusive swimwear, which then I went on to launch about a year after graduation, which became Nomad Swimwear, which is my luxe size inclusive sustainable swim and resort wear brand.
So I wanted to share a couple of projects that we have done recently with our work in size inclusion. So something that we did with Reebok was a consumer learning retreat where the Reebok team came to LA and we set up a fully 2-day immersive experience into the plus size consumer. So really seeing where they shop, how they shop, what they're looking for. And the point of this was to help the design and marketing teams gain very deep consumer insights, strategic product apparel direction, and how to really build the community and engage with influencers. Like, as we're seeing now, community building is so important for brands, and sometimes it's hard for brands to really build it intentionally. So that was what we were there to do. It went really well. They came out of it with some great insights and plans to move forward and how to engage with their plus size consumers. Highway Robery was a robe brand that we worked with. And at the time, they only did a one size fits all, which, as most people know, one size never fits all. So they wanted to create an extended size. So we helped them from start to finish with designing the new fit, fit testing on multiple body types, different models, and then helping them along with the marketing around it. So with that, they actually saw a 20% revenue growth just from adding the extra size in 2 years, which was amazing.
And then for me, Nomads is always one of our ongoing things. So for the size range, that was something that was super important to me. So we carry sizes extra small to 5X in every piece that we make. We're using cutting edge biodegradable swim fabrics, compostable resort wear fabrics. And because of the commitment to size inclusion, we were the most size inclusive brand carried by Anthropology, Shop Bop, and Newly. Our pieces were also featured in Sports Illustrated Swimsuit and worn by Serena Williams. And through those experiences, I was able to see the need for on the back end for retailers to have that support, because many of them are not set up to accommodate size inclusive brands. And that is shown anywhere from being able to even filter to a size. I remember having to tell Anthropology, hey, on the day we launched, the customer can't even filter to a size 5X. Is there a way to update the UX design? So that's an option, so they know it's there. Communicating with them about model selection, because oftentimes for plus sizes, they'll only use a size extra large, and it's impossible to visualize how that's going to translate on your body as a plus size woman. So there's a lot of things that go into it. So while those milestones were incredibly exciting, it definitely opened up a whole host of other issues that we were able to then use in our skill set with Fluffy to help these other brands and retailers. Yeah. And then with that, we thought it'd be helpful to share some of the ways we work with brands. And I think because we come from fashion, it seems like that's the only industry we work in, when really size inclusivity touches every single industry. It's not just fashion, beauty, wellness. So what are some of the ways that those look like or manifest is auditing current offerings and strategy, hosting consumer plus size focus groups like Beth mentioned, like we did for Reebok, curating community events. This is a really big one because so often brands will host community events and invite plus size influencers and then not have any product or anything that actually fits them, which seems like a very easy thing, but it quite often is an oversight. We also help develop creative strategies and offer business resource group and corporate trainings, but really what we serve as is the through line across departments, because especially once you get into these large corporations, everybody is so segmented and in their own silos, and it's really hard to kind of have that initiative work its way across all those different parts of the business. So that's where we really come in and shine and offer tailored services to address their specific needs.
And a brand we wanted to highlight was Ulta Beauty. They're a brand who have shown that inclusion is such a strong business strategy, and they have from the beginning. They're very intentional about inclusivity, and you see that from their product assortment, the language, the customer experience, and even within the corporation itself. They brought us on recently to create corporate training videos on the power of inclusive language. So with those, it was in particular consumer facing. So how are they speaking to their guests, their customers, and really making sure that like inclusion, as Taylor mentioned, is weaved throughout their entire brand, their corporation. So like internally as well as consumer facing. And with that, obviously they've grown to be a massive brand because they're really reflecting their real customer. And obviously the more people who participate, the more people, more business. So yes, that is what we have for you guys today.
Well, thank you both so very much. I was enraptured. So one of the things that I got lucky enough to do in my career was we were working with Adore Me when they were exploring doing brick and mortar stores. And I don't know if you consider that one of those body diversity inclusive brands, but it seemed to me as an outsider that they really were doing what they could to make that something for everyone, at least from a fashion sense as well.
They're definitely up there for sure, Brian.
Gotcha. So, okay, good. Then I'm paying attention to the right things. Awesome. But Beth and Taylor, thank you so very much. We appreciate your presentation. We've made our way to our final presenter of the day. Patrick Yovanov is an industry design graduate and entrepreneur. Through his practice, Jingleheimer, Patrick has helped brands carve out their place in pop culture through a strategic, story-led approach. His presentation, How to Name a Planet, explores naming as a tool for building new, explorable worlds, whether physical or digital, and reveals how a single word can shape the future of a project. So, Patrick, how are you today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Great. Now, I heard that you want to get straight into this because you have a lot to cover. So I'm going to ask you a really brief question. What's your favorite color?
Oh gosh, it's chartreuse. Yeah, it's
Love it.
a weird version of green. Yeah, that's got to be it. And it also has a great name.
I love it. It is a great name. Well, then, Patrick, I will let you take off. The audience is yours.
Awesome. All right. Let's see here. There we go.
Perfect.
Can you see How to Name a Planet?
I can see How to Name a Planet.
All right, let's drive. Thanks again to Daapx for inviting me to talk to you all today. My talk centers on a problem that comes across my desk often as a namer, and that's how to name a planet. That's a big question. So what exactly do I mean by that? Whatever you're building, if you're building something new, it could be a brand, it could be a place, it could just be a new idea or experience. What you're building is a planet, right? You're building a world that you're inviting new people to step onto and explore. And when some people might say that a name is like a small detail of a project that can be sorted out at the end, I'm here to argue otherwise. Because your project's name plays a key role in its experience. And throughout this chat, I'm going to show you through example about how a name gets pulled all the way through end to end through any experience that you're building. Names specifically are what invite new people to step onto a world, right? They're an invitation. They're a first impression to whatever you're building, whatever project you're working on. They give an indication to new people of the conditions that are there, right? The look and feel of this new world. Is this place right for me? Can I step onto this? Names can even go as far as to constructing the language that people speak on this world. How do they talk to each other? How do they navigate that space? So names are important. Throughout this chat, I'll tell you more about why names are important, who I am as a dapper, but then also how exactly to build a world from a single word. So with the extra time that I was given, thank you, we're going to start driving through how to do this because it's a big challenge. And since we're all visual people, we're designers here, I wanted to show you instead of tell you off the bat, again, why names are important. So this is a real world project that I worked on where I was asked, what do you name a corner store that sells both unique provisions and everyday staples? Well, what the name wasn't going to be was pantry management. This is something that we pitched to the client, but because the team and I liked this idea of, curating your home shelves. But to the clients, it felt a little too formal for the world that they wanted to build, the experience that they wanted to provide. So we offered them a different name. That name was Poppins. They didn't choose this one either because this one kind of indexed on the other side of welcoming and warm. It was a little too friendly for the 6 guys that were building this brand. The insight for the actual name of this project came from chatting to both them and people in the neighborhood that would be stopping by this corner store. This was a posh neighborhood who had a lot of things except for one main thing, and there was no easy place to stop in and buy bread. So with that insight in mind, I introduce you to the planet of bread-cetera. And throughout this short video, just take a look at how this became a larger metaphor for this project. So that's just a short snippet of bread-cetera, but you can see how the name really became the center of gravity for that project, and created all the other touch points that support it. From the bread and butter color palette, that was an easy one that the design team made, to the copy that shows up on the merchandise, right? From the hat to the t-shirts. It influenced the words that we embedded into the entryway, that now guests stop in and take photos of and tag on Instagram. It even influenced the grab and go brand that the clients created themselves and the goods that they offer every day. But how do we do this, right? Like this is fun, but what is the secret behind all this work? This is going to cut to the chase really quickly, and this is really what supports a lot of the work that I do and thinking that I do as a namer. And that is that great names are games that invite the world to play. And what do I mean by the world? I mean anyone involved in your project, anyone involved in your experience. For this project specifically, the customer was excited by the idea of getting bread. So they were excited to walk into this corner store, right? The design team got really excited about the fun within this name and the different design metaphors that they could pull out into the actual visual brand. But mostly the clients were excited to build this business, right? They could see themselves owning this, stepping into it, showing up every day, and really bringing this experience to life. So if it wasn't for the name bread-cetera, we would have not got this experience on social, which I'm very proud to have influenced as the namer.
G'day, it's Frank from bread-cetera, and yes, you are looking at me talking into a baguette.
That's Frank from bread-cetera. That was his idea. I think things like this are awesome when a name goes that far to inspire the people that are actually building the business to do things like this. Now to address the elephant in the room. My name is Patrick, right? It is not Jingleheimer. Jingleheimer is the name of my practice. It is my pen name. It is my highest creative self. But ultimately, what I consider myself is a namer. But what does that mean? That is, it means a lot of things. As a namer, you have to be good at both brand strategy and then the world building that comes after it. So this is a sample of what that work as a namer generally looks like. And on the right, you can see snippets of different projects that I've been able to work on. As a freelancer, I get to work with a lot of amazing agencies that bring these names to life, which is a really fun part of the work that I do. The other big elephant in the room is that I went to DAAP for ID, right? So how did I become a neighbor? There is no N in DAAP, right? But I can prove to you that this is true. I went to DAAP. These are photos from my super senior year from 2011. I think this is when we were doing our capstone project and we were just losing our minds. But why did I go into ID? At the time, my two fascinations were both graphic design and architecture. And putting together this presentation, I had to ask myself, like, why were those things so important to me? I could have gone many other ways with my career. And I think it's because this is what my hometown looks like. This is Milan, Ohio, birthplace of Thomas Edison. This is the Google Maps right outside of my high school. It is flat. It is full of cornfields. There is not a lot going on. I was starved for color. I was starved for experiences. And I think I was drawn to DAAP because I wanted to start building them somehow. But throughout my co-ops and also my first couple of jobs outside of school, I realized that I wasn't really drawn to the physical shaping of the objects like we were taught in ID. Actually, what I was drawn to was using the tools that we learned while at school to design like the story that was around them, right? I didn't want to escape into books. I wanted to jump in and feel the experience, right? I wanted to like step into the video game. So by going to DAAP, I'm able to construct language and stories like an artist would. I think about names, I think about their shape, I think about how their letter forms come together, I think about how they sound on the mouth, how they work in conversation, which allows me as a namer to design experiences and worlds in a really interesting way, both physically. This is a brand of Better For You toaster pastries that I worked on. I also get to do the digital side of things, right? By coming up with the core name, you get to play in this really fun way, which allows me to kind of utilize all different parts of brand storytelling that I learned from going to DAAP. So again, how do we even begin to name a planet, right? It's a big question. This is where you start. The naming process when it comes to building a brand sits right in between strategy and design. It's often overlooked. Again, it's usually a detail at the end, but it can be implemented pretty easily just with these 3 simple steps that I've boiled everything down to. And that is immersion, ideation, and alignment. I'm going to tell you what those mean first, and then I'm going to show you how they show up in practice with a real-world experience afterward. So going back to our analogy, how to name a planet, what does the immersion phase look like? That is when you're getting a lay of the land, right? You're mapping all the moving parts around this problem or this brand that you're building, this experience that you're making. And what you do here is you have to ask radically curious questions. You have to go to the experts that surround the problem that you're looking to solve and get to know them personally. Those people aren't only the clients, right? They are the consumers. You want to get to know their personal connection to the problem that you're solving. When you're asking them these questions, the one hot take, the thing to remember from the immersion phase, is that you need to tune in to the biggest feelings that you hear from these conversations that you have. You need to listen to the consumer when their voice raises, right? When they are upset about something, you need to solve that problem. That is where the meatiest names are going to live. Also with the client, when they get excited, when their hands start moving, you know they're passionate about this particular part of the project. You need to document those along the way because that's where you're going to find the most exciting ideas. Moving into ideation. This was tough for the planet metaphor that I gave myself, but this is when you're trying on all sorts of different hats for your planet, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly. And also you're documenting your work along the way. You're trying on names, you're seeing how they feel, you're gathering arguments for why they work or why they don't. But again, how do you find the names or the hats to even try on? I have 3 hot takes here. You need to translate the feelings that you heard and documented from round 1 into new and beautiful words. This is poetry, right? This is where I get to be a poet. We did not have a poetry class at DAAP, but this was a fun thing that I utilized just like out of the box thinking to do. This second piece here is you must go 2 beats beyond the obvious. I'm going to show you what this looks like in practice, but this is how you win trademarks, right? That is a whole other side to this naming game that we're playing. You can't just say something in common language. You have to say it in a new way because that's how you win a trademark. And on top of that, you cannot be fooled by the limits of English. Again, going back to trademarking, you got to push it, right? You have to come up with something new because that is where the most exciting brands live. They're doing something different. So coming up with new language for them is part of the process and part of the fun. The third phase of naming is alignment, and it's exactly what you think it is. It is that one special moment where everything comes together and you get to align the client on a crazy idea. You get a yes from everyone. You find the perfect hat, right? Going back to our metaphor. The key thing to keep in mind here, how do you do this? Is you need to make it a cinematic decision. You can't just show a name on a white piece of paper. You have to put on a show. You have to show your work. You have to give them options that feel really big. When someone comes to you and asks for a naming project, they know the value and they're investing in a project that they want to be successful. So that is part of it. Putting on a show, it's part of how the story got built today and how I got here. With the time I have left, I'm going to run you through this actual project that you're seeing here at warp speed to show you these different phases in practice. So this problem, or this question that I was asked is, what do you name a premium non-alcoholic champagne brand? In the immersion phase, after talking to both the client and just consumers of this world, we learned that the existing non-alcoholic category was, like, although beautiful, kind of dry. And a lot of it was talking about what was being removed from the experience. What we learned in immersion is that the client really wanted to build a brand that was the life of the party. Even though they're a non-alcoholic champagne, they wanted to show up at every wedding. They wanted to show up at every after party, right? One of the biggest goals or moments of excitement was they said they want to be the non-alcoholic option backstage at the Met Gala. And spoiler alert, they ended up doing that. So that's important, getting to the root of why they're even building this business. In ideation, this is when we go 2 beats past the obvious, right? I like to think about this in 3 stages. First, you want to identify the core emotion of that highest moment of excitement. For this project, it was this idea of seeing and being seen, right? Being the life of a party. The next beat here is what I call the symbol, or it's like the shared reference that you, the audience, and the client have that represents that emotional core. For this project, it was the idea of paparazzi, right? You're so special, you're so cool that the paparazzi is showing up and taking photos of you. Now we have to pull this and spin it in a new way that you've never heard of before. So as we think about this, how can we bottle the idea of paparazzi for champagne? The idea was, what if we popped La Rossi? Like, that's interesting, right? Let's go with that. Let's pitch that. And this ultimately is the brand that we ended up building. What you're seeing here is the final name, which is Society de La Rossi. What we learned through the trademarking phase is we needed to be a little bit more distinct, but we used those opportunities to build more brand equity. So we added society on top of it, and we thought it would be funny to actually make it look like 4 different languages. Like this champagne could show up in any culture around the world. But by adding society, we really turned this into an invitation to step into this world and experience this brand. Then the fun part happens, right? When I get to work with all of my favorite design friends, design minds to bring this to life visually. This is the best feeling, when you can take words and then go and win a design award with your words. This is a lot of fun. This project ultimately ended up going and winning first at the Die-Line Awards last year, which we're super proud of. The agency behind this is Blur. These are my good friends. A lot of the work that you've seen here today is their work that they've hired me to do the naming for, so I'm super appreciative of them. So in conclusion, when it comes to naming a planet, what do I want you to take away? What do I want you to remember from this presentation? That is that naming is a practice, and it's a value add to any project. You can implement it with intention, and it unlocks so many interesting opportunities for your full brand experience. The second thing is that language is one of your most powerful design tools. At DAAP, we talk a lot about, visual communication. I'm here to kind of represent the verbal communication side of things. And then lastly, whenever you can, build worlds with friends.
I'm making this last slide a voice memo because the last time I tried to talk through it, I got too emotional to continue. So this is my little hack, my little workaround. This is a photo from 2011. On the right-hand side, you'll see my friend Samantha Noyes. She's a studio mate of mine from ID. 2 years ago, she asked me to name a project of hers for an apparel client. So this next and last slide is a commercial for the planet that her and I worked to name together.
Football, it's high-stress problem solving with dire physical consequences. It's being able to sacrifice things in order to get the common goal. then you can call the same play 100 times and you'll have 100 different results. Time is my most valuable currency. How I use it shapes where I go, what I do, and who I become while on Earth.
Yeah. That's it. Thank you.
Patrick, thank you very much for that. It's funny when you say how to name a planet. I'm like, which planet are we naming? But the name itself creates the planet. It's even more so a universe. And it's like starting with the brand first, we think of the brand identity, but really the name can be a powerful driver for the brand. So thank you for that.
Of course. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. That brings us to the end of our Daapx 2026. Also, I think I saw a hint of chartreuse in Patrick's presentation, so his favorite color came back around. Thank you to all the DAAP alumni who submitted proposals, presented today, and joined us online. Special thank you to Dean Stephanie Pilot, the College of Design, Architecture, Art, and Planning, the DAAP Alumni Council, and the UC Alumni Association for their continued support of this event. While Daapx 2026 has ended, the conversation continues. We invite you to stay connected with the DAAP Alumni Network and join us at an upcoming event this spring, including the DAAP Alumni Chicago Connect, Alumni HQ during DAAP Works, and the DAAP Fashion Show. Thank you again for being part of today's symposium. Have a wonderful afternoon.